environment, interaction, resistance, community, modernism, movement, neoliberalism, culture. Throughout known history, political divisions have arisen in every society, with a variety of forms and functions, different masses with different intentions. Our contemporary world divides into a multitude of positions, all which continually have influence over different subpopulations. This creates an ongoing fluctuation of support, which doesn't always become intrinsically controlled. What defines a movement? What evolves into society, and what remains resistance or protest? Winston Churchill's Great Britain was a revolutionary movement against the Blitzkrieg. Same with the Iranian Revolution against the Shah. However, was the Virginia Tech or Columbine shooting a movement? How about the rebellion in Chiapas? 9/11? What of today? It seems we're continually in the midst of societal movement. The question is, what creates order? What is passive and what is active? When does a movement of resistance become establishment, and what does it need? If you look out your window or turn on your TV to see your community, you're a witness to many things. You may have seen during the last 2 months, prior to the eviction, that a global Occupy movement had made a home in St. James Park, beneath the monumental cathedral, a short walk from King Station. After the original march on October 15th, Occupy Toronto began its conquest of creating awareness of their dissatisfaction with the current system. According to the Wiki Archive, they consider themselves to be participating in a new way of building a movement. Occupy is a way in which they, and I quote, have occupied a space and given themselves time to organize a constant barrage of actions challenging the ills of our community. The broader Occupy movement has been criticized for being disorganized in their target. So what ills are Occupy Toronto interested in overcoming? In the same article, they outline a list of desired reform policies as well as targets aimed at placing restrictions against. These include restricting fractional reserve banking, military intervention, and abuse of natural resources, as well as reforming rights and taxation of corporations, free press, the electoral process, and prisons. They desire to achieve a participatory democracy to best share power and decision-making. If Occupy Toronto is going to make a serious attempt at creating a new leftist political platform, they must have a groundwork to build upon. Yes, it appears they may have a philosophical structure to build the community, but how will they find the rights to physical space where they wish to create their movement? Occupy Toronto has grown into what has been compared to as a mini-village, a tent city with semi-permanent structures, such as the mess tents and yurts. However, the problem is that the collective is viewed as a disruptive passive network by much of the surrounding community. Although the St. James Church does own much of the park and has offered it to the activists as a sanctuary, the city claims a seamless garment over that which it owns, forcing the recent eviction. Despite aiming at higher structures in the national and global political system, Occupy Toronto's success in establishing itself as a community separate from the current global economic system is dependent on municipal support and city politics. The participants intend on creating an active network through raising awareness via representation and protest. However, is it fair to speculate that the culture which participates in Occupy Toronto is separate from the majority in the GTA?
Today I visited the hippies at the Occupy Toronto protest.
There are millions of people here! Can you all fit in the frame?
I'm Brigitte Dupat for Operation Maple.
Wouldn't take her money because he was like, I can't take the day off work, like most of us can, to, participate in this silly little Occupy movement.
Coming out of Union Center, they're blocking all the doors and go somewhere more like peaceful. And,
was it a bit chaotic coming out here?
Yeah, they couldn't get out.
They were in there for a whole month. We've been getting a lot of pressure from other people that live in the area and have businesses in the area that they think the time has come that they want their park back, and I could agree with that, and I think most residents would agree with it. It's just not proper for someone to set up shop and inhabit one of our parks, and we can't allow that to go on forever. Now, we've been, as I said, very patient about the protest.
On the other side of the coin, the Huffington Post quotes, "The general public is overwhelmingly supportive of the Occupy Toronto movement." Also, what would local businesses who have lost up to 30% in revenue since the tent city has been taken down think of the Occupy movement? The community isn't limited to simply watching and support or coexisting symbiotically. Wikipedia quotes, "A group of 7 unions, including the Ontario Public Service Employees Union and the Canadian Labour Congress, have installed porta potties, generators, Mongolian yurts, and a 28-foot mobile kitchen. Also, a large amount of business owners who specialize in wastewater technology, hydraulics, and food provisions have all contributed to the movement." This provokes the question, who does Occupy consist of? If there is no systematic organization of those who did support Occupy, as well as those who would, then how is it possible to really understand who is rallying behind them in the GTA? Asif Bayat, the author of our reading, Uncivil Society, defines an active network as a network of people around a common thread. Because a passive network is a grouping of people interacting through space, there is no clear category as to how close a passive network is to breaking into an active one. However, even if a space were to be filled with like-minded individuals, if they're disdained from addressing a common threat, will their network ever make the required steps to evolve? Occupy feel it has an answer.
You've seen the contribution of a lot of opinions and points of view, but most of us, if not all of us, are here for pretty much the same ideology. What was so beautiful about it was as we were marching, people from the streets were coming off the streets and joining us. They would get off their bikes and I'd see them cross the road and just start marching along with us, saying the same things, and it's because I think essentially people can recognize what this movement is and how it really affects everybody in the world.
However, watch what happens when labor unions clash with Occupy Toronto over who has a voice.
$1 million a year, make sure the people below you, the janitors, the clerks, the secretaries, make a decent wage.
Please not use this to help the crowd.
I think we can have as many free speech zones as we need. Why not? That's the whole point of that.
It's clear the lack of stability in the movement has created skepticism amongst the fence-sitting public. One online blog writes, "I support the Occupy movement. I really do. I just don't support the people who are running it in Toronto. My main concern is that the people involved are more concerned with being part of a movement than a cause." The distinction between a movement and a cause is important when analyzing how societal movements affect the majority of a population. The urban seems to need something to identify with, whether it's their culture, their community, their workplace, gender, class, or maybe that which is more ideologically specific.
Here's Melanie Nagy on the city's first slut walk.
Sierra Harris and Maggie Ivasekal are proud to call their look slutty.
Toronto may fall into the trap of making quick decisions, which are backed by this type of categorization, something which is understandable in the busy life of a Torontonian. That being said, being a human condition, it becomes easy for the local majority to jump on board with the hive mind if there is no information which would enable one to relate to the structure of a cause. The meaning behind a movement carries no weight if there is no discrete cause worth fighting for. There are several possible insights into why Occupy Toronto has difficulty demonstrating their cause. The first is information. With so much concrete evidence supporting their claims simply not available, how does an outsider even begin to understand the reasons behind the movement? Also, it could possibly be their democratic policy, which enables free and diversified representation, which when spoken by someone who does not see the benefit of being politically grounded, comes across chaotic and unprofessional.
Talking about tents and all of a sudden you bring out condoms?
That's what the Occupy Calgary folks
Okay, but this isn't Occupy Calgary, we're occupying Toronto, so who are you to just like
So
totally
are you guys a sex-free
Oh,
zone?
look it over there! It's a bear! Oh, look at over there!
And so I'm sure you can relate to...
I'm having some trouble relating, I gotta be honest with you.
Really? As a Jewish man, you have trouble relating to trying to prevent a Holocaust?
I don't see a Holocaust imminent, at least here in Canada and the States.
What about infrastructure?
I like the resource-based economic model. Basically, if you need it, you get it, because that's the humanitarian thing to do. And it stops all this useless cyclical consumption. Basically, one company can make a cell phone to last 100 years, not a new cell phone every year that's redundant and going to break down. We can do it properly, build things to last, and perfect world.
If your philosophy speaks to simply building the provision one needs, then why are you living in a tent? It is as if these individuals seem to think they have no outreach to external sources of wealth. Is this because Occupy needs to maintain equivalent status to other Occupy movements in other cities? If you want a revolution, and the way in which you are approaching it is oppositional to any large population of people, wouldn't you rethink your tactics? Occupy Toronto does have a website, but it doesn't contain the slightest form of outspoken partnership to other like-minded organizations. No one is illegal? Nope. Indigenous Environmental Network? Okay. So maybe I'm being harsh, Occupy, after all, is new and is quite revolutionary in that it has stretched itself globally. The only other time you see this type of representation is in the UN or the Olympics. In itself, that begs the question, what is limiting the quality of the message to the rest of the world, or in our case the Greater Toronto Area, seeing as that the entire world is involved? I wonder how many people watch Ezra Levant on Sun TV, a man who is a professional at trying to make people feel stupid and angry.
By venturing into the heart, now let's be more accurate, by venturing into the bowels of the Occupy Toronto movement. I did that for you, my people, and for the Gemini Award that will surely come with it. I took precautions, of course. I wore a condom, I took a Tylenol in advance and some hepatitis C shots. I practiced on a bongo drum for the drumming circle I knew would be there. I went there looking to find out what made these folks tick. Was it just boredom? Was it the prospect of having anonymous sex in a public park? Was it an urban camping experience?
Whether or not its intention is to antagonize Occupy Toronto, this professionalism in the media can appear intimidating and scripted.
And what's your feeling on the media coverage?
Didn't you say you didn't want to be interviewed?
I just said that I don't want to be interviewed. I'm here to...
When if I told you I didn't feel like having the camera in my face?
Well, that's too bad.
So it's too bad.
I'm allowed to film you, but if I refuse to be interviewed, then that's my right. But it's my right to film you here because we're in public space, just as it is your right to film us.
Okay, so we could just stand here and stare at each other.
Absolutely. we got all the time in the world, believe me. Do you?
You have all the time in the world?
We all do, yes, here.
Why is that?
Commandant Cartier is saying this nation's name is Canada.
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 Beg pardon, sir, but the word he used, I think it really means those houses down there.
No, believe me, I know the word. It means nation, and Canada is its name.
If two people communicate with a different language, the one with power will always be able to reify or dismantle the other, if that is their intention. We're not implying that all media is right-wing propaganda. Rather, media sources such as CTV and CBC have been relatively realistic, even if there's a dark shade of uncertainty in their message.
Is Occupy Toronto on a crash course?
I'm not going to let the police take my tent, and I'm not going to let them kick me out of this park.
I'm Jeff Semple. Local residents are fuming, and now there's word police and protesters are on the move. See if tensions are coming to a head.
The problem is how a culture of smartness controls the hive mind, which discredits any voice, intelligent or not. Because of perceived local disinterest, and thus Rob Ford's decision to evict Occupy Toronto, Occupy has to leave St. James Park for now. Their goal of reforming Toronto and Canada at large will have to be brought back to the drawing board. Occupy Toronto continues to teeter on the edge of a passive and an active network. The global movement has been defined by slogans, "We are the 99%, and corporate greed. So what does this all mean to us, the leading social analysts of urban structure in Toronto? Well, for one, we now understand that there is a growing social movement in our backyard, and despite the media's attempt at creating a way of making sense of it all, this movement doesn't just consist of a passive network of the urban informal. Now, we didn't focus on the legitimacy of the movement's claims. However, what is your take? Are you in support of Occupy Toronto, even if you've never been there? If the claims are not openly being protested, could that mean that the squatters are simply the bold and desperate representatives of a larger population? David Suzuki, a Canadian icon who has appeared at several Occupy movements across the country, had this to say about those in attendance at Occupy, as well as the misrepresented populations in Canada.
What I am excited by is to see all the young people, because this is about the future for these young people that is being sacrificed for the sake of the corporate agenda. What are corporations for? They exist for one reason and one reason only. They may be doing things that we need that are really useful, but their only reason for existence is to make money. And the faster they make the money, the better it is. And that's just not an acceptable way to run the world. What about people? What about the future and jobs for young people? What about the opportunities for young people? Surely to God, that comes before the desire. We need greater democracy. And one of the things about young people is they're not bothering to vote. They're not bothering to vote because they know that the agenda they hear about from all these politicians isn't about them. It's about the corporate agenda. So They've got to get back out there and reclaim democracy, and that means they got to get their bodies out, and they've got to start voting and becoming active in this process.
The youth is the voice of the future. Social movement doesn't come and go. Social movement is. If Occupy Toronto is trying to retake democracy, that needs to be voiced, because that is something every individual on this planet cares about. And whether we call it Occupy or Planet Earth, humanity needs to come together now before it's too late.